Welcome back to Apolitical. I am your co-host, Alan Strokey, joined as always by my other co-host, the fearless Tyler Goldberg.
Hi, Alan.
It's good to see you.
Fearless.
Yeah, fearless.
Welcome back to the folks at home.
Yeah, well, it's been a while.
It has been a while.
Yeah.
What's funny is we were originally supposed to record an episode last week.
That's right.
Had to postpone recording, and we were like, well, we could always talk about what we were going to talk about last week this week, because what could happen in a week?
Little did we forget that we live in a time where a week is a year and a year is 10 years.
I suppose what couldn't happen
Yeah.
in a week. So today's going to be a little bit of a longer episode. So kick those feet up, get yourself a nice little snack,
Yeah.
pour yourself a nice glass of LaCroix into a mug to make it look official.
As everyone does.
And here we go.
There's a really... We don't really have any set topic today, like
No.
you said. We have a couple of really interesting things to
Just
hit
wanted
on.
to vamp.
And I think let's start off with what we were supposed to talk about
Sure.
last week, the special election season, if you will. This happens basically every time that that a new administration kicks off. There's always a series of races that are usually filling vacancies, like in this case right here. Trump appointed a few members of Congress to his cabinet, so there was some special elections to fill those seats again, and there was a lot of spending related to those. Of course, there was this massive Supreme Court race in Wisconsin that we're going to touch on. But in general, this period of time is seen as an immediate referendum on the first 100 days. That's kind of how the opposition party always views these types of things.
Well, and to go a little further into the history books, really one of the first times that trend played out was in 2017 with the special election for the Georgia 6th Congressional District, an area you and I both know very well.
So, kickstarted our careers in politics in a lot of
Really?
ways. Yeah.
And, that John Ossoff versus Karen Handel special election, of course, this is before John Ossoff was later elected to the Senate.
Yeah.
But that special election was the first of these, as you said, referenda, which I believe is the plural of referendum.
Very good.
Vocab with Tyler. And that was the first of these. I believe it was one of the first $50 million House races. Really an astounding amount of spending. And in 2017, you had the Ossoff race.
Yeah.
You had... the real students of the game will remember the Montana at-large Rob Quist, Greg Gianforte campaign, which was a similar sort of hyped-up special election.
Yeah. Not just in terms of media coverage, but like you mentioned with the Ossoff campaign, in ad dollars.
Yeah.
Massive amounts of money.
And that's the thing is, I don't want to say that the results don't matter, because they obviously matter.
Of course.
And everyone at home should vote in every election possible.
No question.
But in terms of ad dollars and political spending and the ramifications, it doesn't matter who wins. It matters that there was a lot of spending.
Yeah.
So in Wisconsin, we saw $100 million spent for a state Supreme Court race.
Yeah.
Most all time, second most being $50 million spent in the previous Wisconsin state Supreme Court election. So what we're seeing is this time of year is now becoming a common sort of mini election day, much like that was June of 2017 in Georgia, that election. So, in the past, you wouldn't have had to worry, if you were a commercial advertiser, about the political advertising going on around opening day for baseball, for example. Well, that's just classic.
Who could have foreseen?
It was a timer set to remind us to start filming.
But we're early. We're very punctual here at Apolitical, so we couldn't wait to get back to the studio.
We can't cut this out because the beautiful.
This is actually a massive continuity error that you've just unleashed, so we can't edit around this.
No, we can't.
We're doing it live.
Eagle-eyed viewers will know.
Back to what you were saying.
Back to what I was saying. The opening day, for example. Opening day for, let's say, the Brewers, for example, I guarantee you they saw political spending.
No question they did.
And, that's it's something that advertisers wouldn't normally have to deal with. That is now going to be the norm, I think, at the beginning of every administration going forward.
So let's talk a little bit more about the race itself, both
Sure.
in terms of, I think, some of the big takeaways and implications for the upcoming midterms, because that's what everyone's talking about,
Sure.
right? this is a referendum. People are curious if like what would the messaging that we saw in this race will be something that we'll see coming for midterm elections all across the country. And I think there's also going to be an element too of like people are wondering this Elon Musk business, right?
That guy.
Elephant in the room. This is a guy who really out of
Oh,
you like that?
I liked that.
That was intentional.
That was very good.
There's a little bit of a debate about how much of this spending are we going to see going forward from someone like Musk.
Well, and to what extent does it matter? And again, I don't want to be defeatist and say it doesn't matter because it obviously does matter.
It does matter.
But as we saw in Wisconsin, he put a ton of money into it.
Believe he and his PACs spent about $20 million in advertising.
And in the Florida race, one of the Florida races, the Florida 6,
Josh Weil.
Yeah, Weil. While Musk, while the Republican was outraised, I think it was 10-1 by the Democrat, Musk's groups covered the difference.
I believe the final splits in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, I believe it was 21 million in Republican spending for Schimmel versus 19 million for Crawford. That was like her candidate and Associated Press.
Candidate. Because Pat's added the. I see what you're saying.
There was a lot of takeaways that because Schimmel lost by the degree that he did, there were. I've seen some people say that the dollars didn't matter. That like the Democrat overcame the odds, which I don't think is quite accurate.
I don't think that's.
There's been some that say that Musk is so politically poisonous now that we might see him peel back. I also don't know if that's true.
I don't think that's true. I think we might see Democrats feature him in their ads as
question.
we did in Wisconsin and in Florida.
I think that he's going to be a fixture of opposition advertising.
Absolutely.
I also think that him and his PAC personally, they're not going anywhere.
Absolutely not.
They're a tool for the administration.
But at a certain point, does that matter if you have this tit for tat of spending where Democrats are capable of covering
We're
that
on one
ground?
today, ladies and gentlemen.
We said this would be a long episode, and we're not even scratching the surface of
Frankly,
all of these.
his spending, in my opinion, and he's a very unique case because he's just so personally wealthy and so invested in this in politics these days. I think that he's a floor raiser on just total spending in general, not just from what he is bringing to the table himself, but like you said, tit for tat. There's plenty of advertisers on the left who are drumming up money, a lot of wealthy donors themselves,
based on Musk,
who are going to try and combat him. And again, that's just raising the floor here. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the messaging here.
Sure.
And this is going to kind of segue into the other topic that we wanted to discuss today as well. Musk is definitely going to be a fixture, I think, in Democratic messaging going forward. I think something that we hear a lot from our clients here at Assembly when they come to us for our sort of POVs on the political markets is what kind of messages are we going to be seeing? Like we talk a little bit about, like you said, where we're going to be expecting spending in like special election season, where you're like Wisconsin's going to be blowing up, right? I guess that's not really a special election, but it's part of the season.
Off cycle election.
But the content matters too.
Yeah.
And Democrats, the opposition party, they're figuring out like the special elections is like their proving grounds to figure out what messages are salient and which ones aren't. They feel that they have a winning message with kind of going after Musk and the sort of billionaire kind of class financing
as
that. But that's
part of the economy as a whole.
That's the thing.
Now.
We are now, if you've been reading the news lately, or unfortunately we haven't gotten a stock ticker underneath our video feed here. We thought about it.
Our hairlines would recede too much.
Jim Cramer kind of stole our bit. But the biggest story of the week, and probably the entire administration so far, are the tariff wars that have been started, that have been launched.
Now, true fans will remember that we got our start.
True believers
will remember that we got our start doing video content with our election outlook report back in 2023 for the 2024 election. Now, if you remember, Alan, in his video, took us through individual states that would see a lot of spending and what the ramifications of that spending would be. And at the time, the idea was, based on the 2022 midterms, that Republicans were predisposed to having more negative views about the economy than Democrats. So if you were an advertiser in the commercial space that was trying to target maybe a demographic that would tend to lean more conservative, you were risking people thinking that they did not have as much money as they did,
Yeah.
or that the economy was
We're talking
worse.
luxury expenses.
Exactly.
It's not everyday type of items.
Republicans in
Discretionary
2022 were more likely than Democrats to cut back on discretionary spending because they thought the economy was bad or
Right.
worse than Democrats did. Additionally, in 2022, we saw that someone's political affiliation was a bigger indicator on their views of the economy than their personal income. So I might have been personally doing very, very well, but if I were a Republican, I thought the economy was doing worse.
Yeah.
The question is, does that flip now? And I think yes.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that now, if we were holding the midterms today,
Yes.
I think that we would be seeing. I think that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty out there right
Sure.
now. I mean, I'm not an economist, all right. I'm barely an expert in my own.
You don't
field.
even play one on a podcast.
No, I don't. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you what the state of the economy is going to look like
Right.
2 years from now. But what is evident, I think, from like the current sort of again tariff regime that we're seeing here is creating a lot of uncertainty in the markets. Obviously, I think with consumers as well. Every day they turn on cable news and they're seeing that like a recession is more likely and more likely. That's something that I think would be salient across political affiliation, but for more so for Democrats this time around, like you were mentioning in 2022, Republicans were more likely to fear that discretionary spending was just something that's not viable for them. I believe that Democrats are going to be facing that themselves this time around. But I think that, I mean, it's hard to project that kind of stuff. But one thing I do know that will be very easy to project is that Democratic advertisers are going to weaponize what we're seeing right now, as they should. This is because it's the playbook that the Republicans played themselves.
Yes, but we're also taking out the middleman to a certain extent, because in 2022, Republican ads were one of the main generators of economic concerns. Inflation, yes, existed, but what the president has done is sort of removed the middleman of that messaging and has sort of done it for himself. There are many videos of him saying, "This is not a concern. We have to take our medicine, whatever."
There's been a lot of that. A lot of messaging saying short-term uncomfort for long-term gain. That's a very difficult message to sell when you're a Republican congressman in Iowa running for re-election and your constituents are coming after you and saying think money's tight right now and I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to weather this storm.
In a way, those video clips will end up being
they'll be in the ads.
Potent Democratic attacks.
They'll be in the ads.
And so, what all of this does to the consumer who's already facing that uncertainty, already facing that fear about their retirement and their investments and all of that, that's all based on the vibes of this, of the stock market's performance in the last week plus since the announcement was made.
Yeah.
What happens when the actual ramifications of the tariffs start coming into effect? When groceries start getting more expensive, when everyday goods start getting more expensive.
And the airwaves are blanketed of ads.
Which we're already starting to see on both sides of the aisle.
It goes back to what we were talking about in the special election.
Yep.
We were already seeing this type of stuff being floated by Democratic messaging, bringing in things that Musk has said, bringing in things that Trump has said. There's going to be plenty more sound bites like that incorporated into these ads. Regardless of the state of the economy, Democrats know what message they need to run on to kind of combat the Republicans. It's always, this is what we're seeing right now. The midterm messaging is taking shape.
Well, and I think it's, where we see our role in sort of helping advise our clients and for the commercial advertisers who are amongst our most ardent viewers.
Yeah.
In the olden days of 3+ months ago, the idea was the most political disruption you were going to see to your media strategy was going to be an election campaign.
Yep.
$10 billion, higher costs, lower inventory. You can find 30 examples of us saying that just right here behind this table.
We'll get a supercut of that at some point.
It's now political disruption are political issues become political disruption to your media strategy, which is a difference. And so, again, no one is saying that a brand needs to take a political stance, but you need to be prepared for the political disruption. You need to be prepared for, to the extent the president continues down this road, what amount of pushback from his party ends up sort of blocking this.
And even if he doesn't continue to go down this
Exactly.
road, they need to be aware of the messaging that's going to
Yep.
be out there, like side by side with their ads for
From
their brands, for
now-
their products, everything.
Yep.
That's where that's kind of where we're coming to.
Yep.
The tying a little bow
Exactly,
on what
because
we're talking about
it
here.
can't. A midterm election is not just do you support Trump, do you support Biden, and later
You support the
Harris?
direction of the
Do
country.
you support it? Now it's how is your pocketbook doing?
Yep.
Is your senator voting for your interests? Is your congressperson voting for your interests?
And not for nothing, too. The midterm cycle, at least in terms of the ad wars, starts much earlier than it did in 2024.
Absolutely.
We're going to be seeing in markets across Michigan and Georgia, specifically, two of the biggest battlegrounds for 2026. Those campaigns are going to be starting this year.
Absolutely.
And we're going to see the messaging take form probably as early as Q4. In some cases, maybe even at the end of Q3.
I think we're already starting to see issue spending come out in some of these swing districts. All of this is outside of the potential Republican reconciliation package, which that was a huge driver of spending when Democrats were doing a reconciliation package in 21 and 22. Something to the tune of like $80 to $100 million, I believe.
Yeah.
That's on top of a midterm cycle. So all of this to say, and something that I think has been said by many pundits, which I think we qualify as pundits.
I don't really know if I want to, but
Well,
I think
you
we
know,
do.
I think we do at this point.
Yeah.
We have official microphones. Is buckle up, because these changes and these disruptions are just getting started. As you said, the tariff issue war could end today, and there would still be political disruption.
No question.
The
The
midterms-
uncertainty that's caused by it is going to be pervasive
Yep.
throughout all the actions that this administration takes. And that's not a political thing. That's just part. That's part of the brand.
The midterms,
That's part of their brand.
In your wishful thinking
Yeah.
of the midterms being held today, we'd already be into the 2028 presidential cycle.
Basically.
So all of that to say, have a plan. Make sure you are factoring in potential political disruption, the political issues, and the content of the messaging, because it's only going up from here.
It's only going up from here.
And on that happy note,
Yeah, buckle up. It's going up from here. Get ready. That's
to the moon, I believe.
glad we took a few weeks to come up with that heartwarming message.
Until next time.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in. I'm Alan Sroki.
And I'm Tyler Goldberg. Thanks for watching Apolitical.
Boys are back in town.